After a long day's work, a young woman grows tired of waiting in Seattle's cold, unrelenting rain. She soon makes a decision she'll forever regret. One girl would soon become countless more as they fell victim to one of the most prolific serial killers in the history of the United States, the Green River Killer. As the murder spree raged on, the police became so desperate to catch the killer, they turned to none other than Ted Bundy for help.
There are an infinite number of ways to explain how a man can come to the point where he destroys human life as this person has, killing because he wants to kill.
The young woman waiting in the rain eventually made the decision to abandon her bus stop and attempt to flag down a ride home. Soon, a man offers her a lift, and consistent with the area and times, they agree on another transaction as well.
I think the very first woman I dated on a Pacific highway, I picked her up there and I choked her, but I didn't kill her. I think that was the very first one I choked and never killed her.
Somehow, she survives the attack and narrowly escapes with her life. But so many who come after her won't be quite as lucky. It's the summer of 1982, and the Pacific Avenue South Strip, located near the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, is alive with teenage girls and young women seeking paying dates.
I was paying for sex. We agreed on sex. Sometimes I'd kill them, sometimes I wouldn't. I had a lot of rage at that time, and that's why I killed these women.
It's quite monumental because the missing juvenile problem is that nobody gives a shit, especially nobody gives a darn about runaway juveniles.
The street workers, all but forgotten, remain trapped in a vicious cycle, and the lifestyle is an exceptionally dangerous one.
As you correctly pointed out, you're dealing with a class of victims who are hard to trace and hard to investigate, who disappear without being reported, whose movements are hard to trace, whose friends are difficult to run down.
Then the work suddenly becomes even more perilous. First, one body is located, then another. Within just a month, the body count has reached 5. These girls and women of the night are disappearing at a frequency that is increasingly alarming.
How did you kill her?
Choked her.
With what?
My arm. When I pick up a woman, I usually date them. We agree on sex, and if she enjoys it, it's she's probably faking it. And I would be on top of her, usually face to face. If I couldn't have a climax, I would have her turn around and I would get her from the back end, penis and vagina, not rectum or anything. Sometimes I'd kill them, sometimes I wouldn't. I had a lot of rage at that time, and that's why I killed these women. I didn't plan on killing them.
A couple of years pass, and the number of missing and murdered women climbs to well over 40.
And there's, like I said, there's upwards of up to 63 people I killed, so they kind of run together sometimes. And I didn't make a list in my mind which ones I killed with the rope, which I killed with my arms.
The sheer number of victims gives insight into how the killer saw the victims as easily dispensable. In his mind, they were objects to be used for his pleasure and nothing more.
Do you think it's possible that this guy could stop?
No, well, unless he got, unless he was born again and he got filled with the Holy Spirit.
But I believe God's forgives you from your sins.
You think he's forgiven you now?
I think he has.
In a very real way, this guy's figured it out by now.
Oh, I know.
He figured it out.
He's way ahead of us. I mean, he's so far ahead of us, it's unreal.
It would be nearly 2 harrowing decades before the monster is finally identified. The first victim was recovered on July 15th of 1982. A gruesome discovery. 2 teenage boys had spotted her body floating in Washington State's Green River. Wendy Cofield was just 16 years old when she was killed. She disappeared a week earlier. It was later found that she'd been strangled with an item of her own clothing.
Is it the first one I killed?
Yes.
I don't actually remember where I killed them because I wasn't planning on killing any of them.
It's possible that the killer didn't decide in advance that he was going to kill. It's possible he acted in the moment. It should be noted that impulsivity is a sign of antisocial personality disorder. However, committing murder is likely something that he fantasized about. so the idea was likely something he'd been considering before actually committing the crime. At this point, Wendy's death appeared to be an isolated event. Everyone hoped that was the case, but it would soon prove to be the beginning of a murderous rampage like no other. Then another body. Deborah Bonner, age 23, was located just a few weeks later. Within a month, the body count quickly climbed to 5, with the discovery of a Marcia Chapman, age 31, Cynthia Hines, age 17, and Opal Mills, just 16 years old, all found at the same Green River dump site.
Maybe I better tell you something about the dump sites. The most prevalent that we had right off the bat was the 5 right in the river.
And he dumped them in there for a reason. He dumped them in there. He dumped Coalfield and company in there because he didn't think they'd be found. And he must have had some reason for believing that.
The beautiful area that had once provided a heavenly ambiance had quickly transformed into hell on earth.
So why don't you tell us what you can remember about
Number 4, I think, was Hines.
Okay.
She was the one that was in the river. I don't actually remember where I killed her. So after I had sex with her and killed her.
So he was returning to the dump site.
He does. He's returning to his dump sites, not just to bring bodies back, but probably in the interim. He's returning, if only to drive by, he's returning to check those dump sites out after he's dumped the body there. I can almost guarantee it.
How about after we found it?
I don't know. We wouldn't touch it, but 10-mile pole.
He was partially correct in his speculation. The killer was revisiting the scenes. As for the Green River killer's victim, he would later return to her body after work.
Drove down the same way to where the body was, and I drove down further, parked on the side of the road, looked both ways, nobody was watching, and I ran down the hill towards where the trail was, pulled off any clothes that she might have had, had sex with her right there in the spot, put my pants back on, drug her down into the river, got in the river, pushed her down and put 1 or 2 rocks on top of her.
Gary, what's the longest time that it's been after you killed one of these girls that you came back and fucked them?
2-3 days. Until there was a smell or maggots.
The killer may have experienced gratification by reliving the recent murder during his deplorable act, known as necrophilia. Now, brace yourself for what comes next.
In the water right there, I found a rock to put in her vagina.
At what point did you insert the rock in her vagina?
It was after she got in the water, after she was in the water, there was a rock that looked like the size of fit her, and I put it in there. That was about where I put the rock in during that process. That way there I wouldn't try to maybe come back the next day and pull her out of the water and have sex with her after she was in the water for a couple of days. That's the reason for both of them, not to go back to have sex with them, because they had the rock in them. That was one of the reasons.
Why would you want to stop having sex with her?
I have to lift up the rock. I'd have to get into the water. There's a chance of losing her down the river. I would have the rock in there so I wouldn't have to, and I'd go out and kill another woman.
Why did you have to put the rock in her vagina?
I'm thinking is I had to put the rock in the vagina so I wouldn't go back and dig her out of the river and screw her on the bank, put her back in, take all that effort of putting her back in. That's when I put the rock in.
Her arms were floating?
Her arms were not flooring, but they were probably moving.
Was she waving at you?
I might just be getting that from the discovery. No, she wasn't waving at me. No, just waving with any kind of current coming by.
So then you put Hines in the river?
Put Hines in the river.
Cynthia was the final victim discarded in the Green River, but she wasn't the last of his victims, not even close. The following month, the body count reached 6 with the finding of Giselle Lovern on September 25, 1982. At just 17 years of age, Giselle could have had a bright future ahead of her. She was exceptionally intelligent and was on her way out of working the streets. She'd planned to call it quits after 1 more week. She just needed enough money to fund her trip home to California.
You found these first five really quickly. You can see he changes. He's obviously not going to use that Green River anymore, at least not for a while. And he's looking for something that's more effective, so he goes back to dry land with number 6. And Lovern is found in September, but still he sticks to these sites.
It seems the killer found a better way to conceal the discarded bodies following his atrocities at the Green River.
Between September of 82 and May of 83, he didn't find anybody. So in his mind, he was effective.
Let's say he's continuing to kill. Okay, still in the Seattle area, and we found these locations out here. What would his next step be?
That was the million-dollar question, and unfortunately, there was just no way to accurately predict the answer. With the passing months came more strangled bodies. By the end of 1982, somewhere around 15 murders had occurred, though only a fraction of the remains of the victims had been located at the time. One of the youngest victims, estimated to be his 15th kill, was Colleen Brockman. She was only 15 years old when she disappeared on Christmas Eve of 1982. And like the others, her story is heart-wrenching. It's said she told a friend that her home life in North Seattle, where she lived with her father and brother, was miserable. However, she didn't elaborate further. Colleen had run away a few times previously, but she always returned home. This time would be much different.
I'm quite sure that was one in Seattle on Christmas, and it was cold, but she needed the money.
Colleen climbed into a truck, having no idea she had just minutes to live.
We got in the back of the truck, having sex on top. I was on top of her, and then she asked me if I would like to have sex in the rear. Maybe it was behind her in the rear. Anal sex. I told her I didn't have like sex in the rear. I don't know if we did or not. And I got behind her, and I thought sure it was in her vagina. I climaxed, and I think she had some kind of clothes on. And I choked her. She didn't fight too much. I walked her in to a creek there in Jovina. I walked her in some 20 feet, put her on the bank side towards the road. I don't think I went back and had sex. I think I had all of her clothes. But I remember I walked her upstream.
Walked her or drug her?
Drug her up. Feet first. I think it was feet first or hands first. I don't know, but it was upstream, uphill, next to the stream and the road. If her hands were over her head, I put her that way. If her feet were there, her hands behind her, and left her there.
Describe her. Race, height, weight, age.
She's, I'd say, 14 to 16, maybe at the most 18. Light color hair, the puffiness of her cheeks,
Baby fat.
the baby fat.
Well, this photograph looks like this girl has something on her teeth. Does that look familiar?
To the braces, in.
Colleen's remains weren't located until 18 months after her disappearance. Sadly, it was the braces on her teeth that helped identify the teenage girl. As the months rolled by and the bodies continued to accumulate, the girls and women working the streets lived in fear, always looking over their shoulders. The speculation on the part of law enforcement was endless. Detectives found the level of frustration hard to bear as they raced to identify the assailant. The efforts always proved futile. They were further demoralized each time another body or set of remains was located. The horrifying spree raged on. At its height in 1983, as many as 5 more women would disappear in as short as a month's time. It's estimated that the Green River Killer had already killed approximately 20 of his victims by April of 1983. All the while, law enforcement was absolutely baffled, with no idea on how to stop him, never mind uncover his identity.
What do you think's motivating?
He denied to kill. In its own way, who knows? I mean, in the detailed recesses of his mind, how this particular behavior pattern evolved. There are an infinite number of ways to explain how a man can come to the point where he destroys human life as this person has. You know, he's killing because he wants to kill.
That was just downright killing. I wasn't there to rape her.
On the night of April 30th, 1983, 18-year-old Marie Mulvar was working as a prostitute when she climbed into a truck. Her boyfriend often trailed behind in an attempt to keep her safe, but on this night, he soon lost sight of the vehicle at a traffic signal and wasn't able to find the truck Marie got into. Sadly, Marie would never be seen alive again.
Do you think there's something that we can do to draw him to us, draw him out of the woodwork?
Yes. I think there are a couple of things. May sound a little bit strange. But I'll offer them to you for what they're worth. There are a couple things that I would say, with what I know here, you find a fresh body. I put that site under surveillance. I wouldn't move in. Now, that sounds a little bit odd to you. I would move in, secure the area, and try to keep everything off, your radios, right? But set up a surveillance network on that area. Now, you might want to move the body under cover of darkness, because let's face it, by the time, if your man comes back to that site, by the time he gets on top of that body, you've already to the point where the body was, you've already got his number, and you're already going to be in on him. The best chance you have of catching this guy red-handed is to get a site with a fresh body and stick it out.
Bundy may have felt that he was in a position of authority or even superior to the police, since they'd requested his assistance with the case. This experience was likely a huge boost to his ego. Even so, the theory seemed to make sense, as it's not uncommon for a serial killer to return to the scene of the crime or to the place where they left their victim. Unfortunately, law enforcement was never able to pull it off. How was this monster able to convince each victim that he was harmless, that the transaction was a safe one to engage in?
But my initial impressions was this guy is young. He's, more or less in the same socioeconomic kind of strata that these young women can be associated with, lower middle class, let's say, that he's between 20 and 30, probably closer to 20. He's young, a low-paying job that restricts his movement. He doesn't have a lot of money. He can't move around. My gut reaction is these girls are being approached by somebody who really puts them at ease.
It was true. Police would eventually learn that the killer did have an unassuming appearance. He was fairly young and clean-cut, yet unremarkable. One of the few victims who survived his attack described him as boring and dull, in fact. The serial killer consultant contributed an idea to the detective.
Have you ever sat down and asked these girls, what kind of person do you think the Green River guy is? What does he look like? How old is he? And I'll bet you the guy would turn out to be old, maybe wearing a business suit, or maybe, maybe unshaven. But I bet you the last person they would expect to be the killer would be one of their own peers.
Bundy was most likely spot on, relating to the street worker's assumption of the killer's appearance. Maybe it was the age-old case of a wolf in sheep's clothing. It was no surprise that Bundy was also quite intrigued by the killer's morbid work.
In terms of when your victims disappeared, when they were found, where they were found, it's kind of fascinating watching some of this unfold. But this guy is learning. He's trying to find the best way to dispose of these bodies he can think of.
Bundy may have even been envious of the mysterious Green River killer because he hadn't been caught yet. Maybe it's possible, though, that Bundy and those close to the case overestimated the Green River killer's abilities. Areas of vast wilderness were at his disposal, after all, nearly in his own backyard. He took advantage of his surroundings, and it worked in his favor. And as the investigation continued, the killer tailored his methods as he saw fit.
That's when I started burying them, and when I started taking them out where I wouldn't go back.
You had an urge to go back and have sex with the bodies.
As I went back, I did have an urge, but I didn't do it.
The killer's attention to detail, however, was questionable. When he approached a teenage girl or woman, appearance wasn't much of a deciding factor.
She could have had a mustache, I probably wouldn't have known. I can't remember the faces because after I killed them, I couldn't look at them anymore.
He may have avoided looking at the faces of the victims in an attempt to dehumanize them. If he didn't see them as real people, maybe the killings were easier to commit. It seems they were all crimes of opportunity. Each victim had simply been at the wrong place at the wrong time. The killer also had a conveniently selective memory. He was able to recall minute, insignificant details while failing to remember those of importance.
Amazing, you remember the junk better than you do the
It says, yes.
you know?
It's clear that the killer viewed his victims as unimportant and insignificant. He didn't see them as people. The only thing he cared about was fulfilling his own desires. Through the course of interviews conducted over the killer's eventual arrest, detectives were finally able to get answers to some of the burning questions that had gone unanswered for so many years as they tried to make sense of how he remained at large for so long.
When the crime scene tape was up, did you ever drive by or see the area where they recovered her?
No, I stayed away from those areas. I just didn't want to be, because I've heard sometimes they film people come in and film everybody like they did with these sites, because guys like to come back to see where they kill people and they're in the audience. I've heard that.
Through the interviews also came the revelation of another sadistic ritual the ruthless killer took pleasure in. As if taking their lives wasn't enough, he also took from the victims the few things they had.
There's no evidence of it.
Well,
Clothing, there's no jewelry.
why is he doing that? We keep a minimum amount of evidence. No fibers, no hairs. Doesn't want, he may have a thing for clothes, but more likely, this guy doesn't want to be caught. Leaving a victim nude is the best way to leave the least amount of evidence.
True, but that wasn't the only motivating factor behind leaving the victims bare. The Green River Killer was the epitome of cold and calculating, as you'll see.
Did you take anything from this particular victim, take her clothing or anything?
Every one of them almost I took the clothing because I'm not to wear it or anything like that. It was just to, because maybe the hatred of the women that I'd like to have sex with, clothes on.
He loathed the women so much that he believed they didn't even deserve their clothes. Maybe this was his effort to inflict even more punishment upon them after their deaths.
I think for whatever reason, however he got to this point of killing prostitutes, it may have been a deliberate determination on his part that these were easy prey. It may be that he had something specifically against female teenage prostitutes.
What would you then do with the clothing?
Usually I would either throw it away, or if I was throw it out the car when I was driving the truck.
And then there was also the jewelry.
Jewelry I put in 3 or 4 different places.
Why did you take the jewelry from the victims in the first place? What prompted you to take the necklace off or the ring off?
All this time I've never really thought of why I did it. Maybe it was to hurt the victims or something, the woman I killed.
Basically, they die,
They die, I take the
and then
jewelry.
you strip them right away of their jewelry?
Yeah,
And what was the point of that?
just to take it off and put it in my pocket. There's no, I did with almost every one of the bodies.
Like removing earrings off a dead person. Not kind of weird?
It's probably kind of weird to you, but in my state of mind, it was their possessions, and now it's mine, and that's
What would you do
it.
if you had a ring that was really hard to get off?
I never had a ring that was real hard to get off.
And what would he do with the jewelry he stole from the victims?
Just get rid of it. Throw it into the bathroom or leave it at the airport, or just not send
That
it.
doesn't make any sense to me. You think the police are going to think it's just a bad robbery? Taking jewelry?
It'd be a combination. It'd be maybe it's my trademark.
At times, he'd bring the jewelry to work and secretly toss the pieces into the women's restroom, knowing they'd be found. It likely thrilled him that there was a secret that only he was in on. He may have felt superior because he knew the truth, but no one else did. In actuality, it all came down to the fact that he didn't care who ended up with the jewelry.
Why do you even go to the trouble taking it to work? To the employees trying to give them away
Because
or leave places?
even though they,
Why wouldn't you just throw them out the window with the clothes?
because I wanted them to go to somebody that was not a whore.
The killer's hatred toward his victims was so extreme, killing them still fell short of satisfying his sinister urges. In the years that followed 1983, the frequency of the killings had slowed considerably. Nearly 2 decades after the rampage began in 2001, everything caught up with the Green River Killer. The identity of the ruthless killer, one who had evaded police capture for so long, was shocking. He was a 52-year-old truck painter at a commercial manufacturing plant. His name was Gary Ridgway. And that was just the beginning. Over the years, the authorities had this ruthless killer in their sights, almost stopping his murderous rampage, and yet each time he slipped through their fingers to deadly consequences. A brief glimpse into how his deranged world began may help to shed light on the trajectory that landed him in this very seat. There were blatant warning signs well before the violence escalated to murder. In retrospect, two distinct sets of circumstances seem to have contributed to Gary's evolution to evil. For one, it said that his domineering mother behaved inappropriately toward him during his early adolescence. Apparently, young Gary had a history of bedwetting that continued into the onset of his teen years. He would later allege, while speaking to a psychologist, that he could recall his mother washing his genitals after these types of episodes. Perhaps even more disturbing, he divulged that he was sexually attracted to his own mother as a teen, and he fantasized about killing her. In addition, it seems Gary was profoundly affected by a distinct hatred his father had for prostitutes. He openly voiced his resentment of street workers around his family members. Gary bought into this same sentiment and took that animosity to a whole new level. By his teenage years, Gary had developed an innate desire to torture and kill. The first known fatality at Gary's hands was a family cat. This early warning sign indicates that he felt a lack of empathy for another living thing, which is one of the most well-known signs of psychopathy. Gary's violent acts escalated over time, though the victim that followed the cat was still no match for him. He lured a 6-year-old boy into the woods, where he stabbed the child in the abdomen. Miraculously, the child survived. During this time, Gary wasn't performing well in school, and his IQ was estimated to sit somewhere in the low 80s. Not far into adulthood, Gary had immersed himself in the world of adult entertainment workers. Even the contraction of gonorrhea didn't faze him. Interestingly, promiscuity is often a sign of psychopathy. Psychopaths tend to get bored easily, so they may frequently seek out new partners. Through all of his killing years, Gary was able to balance a job, 3 consecutive marriages, and 1 child. The life he led didn't seem consistent with one that a serial killer would lead, and maybe this contributed to his ability to go undetected. He was able to blend in, and though psychopaths do not experience feelings the same way that other people do, they are able to mimic emotions. This helps them manipulate those around them, and it's clear Gary did just that.
When he's doing all this, he can't be conducting normal relationships with people. His whole life is upset. He might find it hard to hold a job, hard to be in relationships with other people.
Yet Gary fooled everyone around him through all the many years of his killings. What follows is an interview he gave after his arrest, where he begins to shed light on how he was able to go undetected for so long.
That day, I went to work like normal. I don't know if it was overtime or not. About 9 o'clock, I was called into the office. I was brought into the office by the plant manager.
Don't let his soft-spoken demeanor fool you. This coward agreed to provide information in order to avoid the very fate that his victims never had a say in: a death sentence.
Well, Gary, what we decided to do based on content of the proffer of the agreement was we'd like to start with is the bodies that are still out there. Every day that goes by, there's a chance that a house could be built on one.
10 to 14 bodies out there that we are unaware of, we have not found. So,
Possibly the most frustrating element of this case is the fact that Gary didn't go completely unnoticed over all those killing years. Encounters with law enforcement became commonplace. In actuality, it wasn't long before he'd landed himself at the top of the potential suspects list. Unfortunately, the evidence to build a case against him had not yet been uncovered, and he continually managed to evade charges. Consequently, more lives were lost. One of Gary's earliest run-ins with law enforcement came about after that catastrophic night that Marie Malvar climbed into his infamous truck, never to be seen again. Though her boyfriend lost track of the vehicle, he was able to locate a truck that closely resembled the one Marie had entered.
What were you driving? A 1975 Dodge pickup with maroon and Primary.
It will come as no surprise that the truck found by Marie's boyfriend happened to be parked in Gary's driveway.
Melbar, it was pretty close to the house. It was only 5 miles away or so.
When did the Des Moines detective come to your house
They came
in relation to Marie Malva?
I was on strike then, and they came the next day or something.
The next day?
Yeah. And they walked right to the house and didn't look, looked around and didn't see anything.
By the time the detective arrived, Marie was long gone. Her remains would not be located until 20 years after her disappearance. Another documented encounter with law enforcement came in 1984. By this time, Gary had made it high on the list of potential suspects. They were privy to his frequent transactions with prostitutes. There was suspicion that he could be the very monster they were looking for, disguised in a mask of mediocrity. However, it came down to the fact that there just wasn't direct evidence to tie him to any of the murders. At least, not yet. He agreed to a polygraph, and the test was administered on May 7th. Upwards of 40 victims had fallen prey to Gary by this time. Approximately half of the deceased had been recovered. And somehow, he passed. No deception was detected. How could this be? Given that polygraphs are notoriously unreliable, however, perhaps Gary had simply figured out how to beat the system.
Maybe the polygraph was too general. I don't know. Maybe he was just, there was something wrong with his mind. There was obviously something wrong with his mind.
What'd you think? What were you doing? What was going through your mind?
Excuse me, I don't know. I didn't, I just was going to take it and thought for sure pass it.
You thought for sure you'd pass it?
Yeah. And I don't think what the questions weren't maybe precise enough to, so I don't remember what questions were.
He believed he'd pass for good reason. He'd already managed to get away with so many murders. He may have believed he was too smart to get caught. During the course of one of his many meetings, Gary provided officials with a saliva sample in 1987. Of course, at the time, forensic testing was not yet advanced enough to match saliva with other biological materials from the same individual. The sample was stored, along with those obtained from victims, until they could be tested without fear of losing the small amounts of evidence they'd managed to preserve over many years. Though few and far between, there were also stories of survival. A few women survived their brushes with death at the hands of the Green River Killer.
Tell me a little bit about the one that got away.
She was a black lady, little heavyset, 5'10", bigger than what I could handle. We walked back to the truck and I apologized to her, and she took her to where I needed to drop her off and dropped her off. She got her money, and she probably used to men beating her up or something, but it didn't. She didn't turn me in, I don't think so.
Sadly, Gary was likely right, considering the dangers in her line of work. Another woman, on the other hand, did go to the police, but not right away. It was over 2 years before she summoned up the courage to contact law enforcement. Rebecca Garday went to the police in December of 1984. She told of the attack that occurred in November of 1982. Gary recalled the assault having been prior to the murder of his first victim that previous July. As he explained previously, the details began to run together. If she'd been attacked in November, then more than 10 victims had already been murdered. As a result of Rebecca having provided information to police, Gary was interviewed a couple months later, in February of 1985. He placed all the blame on Rebecca for the failed encounter.
She bit me and I choked her. And I let her go. Let's back up a little bit, okay? Did you take your clothes off? Just my pants. She went down and started giving you a blowjob. Yes. How long into it was it before you said she bit you? A minute or so? Tried to reach an orgasm? No. You say she bit you. What did you do then? I pulled it out of her mouth and choked her. How did you choke her? From the back. From the back? Yeah. With your hand? Put her in a headlock? Or? My arm. Your arm. Why did you decide to choke her? Because she bit me. I don't know why. And you say you choked her for about 15 seconds. 20 seconds, I don't know. Okay, you say you dated a lot of girls. Has this happened with any others? No, it hasn't. But you had no other incidents with no other girls except this one particular one that we're talking about that you choked. Yes. What would have happened if she died? Well, I don't think she would have. You know anything about chokeholds? No.
Gary likely blamed Rebecca in an attempt to justify his actions to police.
She bit me. I don't know why.
He knew that it's his word against hers, despite the fact that his story didn't make sense. And then came the conclusion reached by the detective.
Gary told me that he hoped that nothing would become of this. However, if it did, that he could understand, and it might teach him a lesson to where he would never go out and hire girls again. I recommend that this case be placed in a closed file. We have identified our suspect in the Gardia assault case. Rebecca does not wish to prosecute for the assault. I think her intention was just to identify a possible Green River suspect. Gary should maybe be looked at a little closer, possibly relating to other assaults.
And just like that, Gary had managed to evade law enforcement once again. But eventually, Gary Ridgway was finally caught. The ruthless killer's spree was finally brought to an end, thanks to a forensic technique known as short tandem repeat and the saliva sample obtained in 1987. A genetic profile of the strangler was produced, and he was quickly linked to 4 victims, and that number would grow considerably with time. In December of 2003, Gary was sentenced to 48 life sentences without the possibility of parole. In 2011, yet another life sentence was added to the 48 he'd already received, as he pleaded guilty to the 1982 killing of Rebecca Marrero. The actual count of vulnerable teenage girls and women who fell prey to Gary's diabolical undertaking has been projected at somewhere around 80 to 90 victims. Gary is amongst the most prolific American serial killers on record. To this day, there are still sets of unidentified remains and families whose questions have yet to be answered. It's likely that more murders will be linked to Gary as he sits in his jail cell.
I'm Lester Holt. Tonight on Dateline, she was a woman determined to change the world. But when she disappeared one summer's night, her family's world was changed forever. The feeling that you're leaving your child for the last time. We find her shoes, the screens missing from the window, and the feeling your child for the last time. She fought back and she scratched that individual. There was plenty of DNA. There was DNA under every fingernail. We could learn about the argument with the boyfriend. This is a guy trying to go where the hell am I? That's what it sounds like. Things didn't add up. You didn't think this was someone close to her. I just knew he was in the house. Here's Josh Mankiewicz with the woman who couldn't scream. November 2003. 2 women were barricaded inside their bathroom and desperately calling 911. They'd seen the intruder before, watching them, lurking, waiting. Now, he was inside the apartment. They shared as college roommates. You'll want to remember this 1888 call, because although no one knew it at the time, what happened to those terrified women on that night held the key to solving a murder. It was a mystery that went on for years and spanned hundreds of miles, weeks before that frantic call. And just a few miles away, that's where our story begins. It was August 31st. A couple out target shooting that morning made the discovery. Soon, a sheriff's investigator was interviewing them at the scene. I was looking for signs of life. I was trying to see if she was. The body appeared to have been there for several hours. Was it kind of blind luck that somebody found that body so soon after it was done? Because I can't get the feeling like it would have been quite possible for no one to find it for months. If they hadn't cut out target practicing, it would have been a while before they'd found her. Back then, Robert Jones was a captain with the Doña Attic that took me to where the body was found. She was face down and her legs were actually spread apart. I think so. I think it was more of a message of his power and stuff like that, but it was definitely a message. And her killer had attempted to burn her corpse. He poured some kind of liquid on her shoulder area and her back and then lit it on fire. That attempt to hide or destroy evidence had the killer or killers left behind a partially new body scraped and badly burned. The woman appeared to be in her 60s, dark shoulder-length hair, big blue eyes, and no ID. There was a tire truck there that we got some good photographs off of that we could use for comparison purposes. And you're reasonably sure that belonged to the killer's vehicle? Yeah. It was the only truck that had to be the vehicle. To cops, the scene suggested she'd been killed somewhere else and then brought to this area near an old landfill. So, where was that original crime scene? And more importantly, who was she? Around 3 p.m. about 4 hours after the body was found, the phone rang at the Las Cruces Police Department. A woman was reporting she'd last been seen at a house party with her boyfriend. We would get several missing person cases a month. Mark Myers was a detective with the Las Cruces PD. I think what was concerning about this one was a close proximity to her house to where the party was. More troubling was that the woman had left her car at the party and didn't take any of her personal belongings with her. She didn't have any means. Her purse, her keys, everything was left of them. She should have been home. And so, when her roommates got home and she wasn't there, they were really concerned. Police already knew a body had been found in the desert earlier that day. Officers responded to the home of the caller, a woman named Tracy Waters. A 22-year-old woman. She had dark shoulder-length hair and big blue eyes. Would that photo solve the mystery? Who was that woman in the desert when we come back? I screamed. She looked like she was in pain, and it was awful. A disturbing twist was ahead and an ordeal that would test them all. He says no. It was the long Labor Day weekend in Las Cruces, a college town home to New Mexico State University. Things were going to be different this school year for Tracy Waters and for her roommate, Katie Sepich, who was starting grad school to study business administration. And for Katie's boyfriend, Joe Bischoff, he was moving home to Gallup, New Mexico, to help with his family's business. We are making plans for which weekends one would come and one would go to see the opening. That holiday weekend, Joe was in town to pick up the last of his stuff. Of course, he and Katie made plans to get together. She worked that day, in between doing things, and Joe took, well, maybe I just better say, she took Joe and he bought her a ring. It was her birthstone that she had been eyeballing. We had gone the day before to the store and looked at it, just like a promise ring. I mean, I don't think I would ever type, but I think it was definitely a look to the future, right? I mean, that would certainly seem to suggest that Joe was thinking of a future just as she was. Yes, yeah. Sort of. One evening long party. An evening long party. As usual, by the end of the party, and continued, Tracy had fallen asleep in one of the bedrooms, and in the middle of the night, she heard whispers. I remember hearing down the hall, "Where's Katie?" But I was more hearing it in the term of like, where in the house, not like where in the world, and I just never came out of the room. The next morning, Joe knocked on the bedroom door and asked Tracy if Katie was gone, and he didn't know where she was. So I went to grab my phone, and he said, "I've called her, her phone's here." Right out the gate, I said, "Did you guys get an argument? Was she mad?" He said no. Did he know why she left the party? I don't know that he was even saying that she had left, except that she wasn't there. And he was like, "Do you know where she went? Have you heard from her?" And like, I was asleep. They walked back to the house they shared. I go home, and expecting to see her in her room. Yes. There was no like sign that she had come in or left or anything. Her person wallet and cell phone were all back at the party. In her car. Her car was at the party. Tracy started calling every friend who lived within walking distance. Had anyone seen him? People were telling me no. I was getting more and more nervous, so I asked Joe, seriously, what happened? And he said, we got into an argument, but I don't know where she went. That sounded a little different from what he'd said earlier. Did he describe the nature of that argument? No, not at that time. He wouldn't say what it was about. No, I also wasn't asking, because them getting into an argument wasn't unheard of. But her storming off without her face. All kinds of scenarios raced through Tracy's mind. If she were walking and she had gotten hit, like if someone had hit her, so I called hospitals. And then, if she were walking and got picked up by police because she was definitely intoxicated, so I called the jail. To all of this, you get up pretty quick. No, we have no one. You get up pretty quick, NSC. And at this point, Joe and a friend of his are driving up and down the street just looking to see if Joe were worried or sort of exasperated, like, why are you doing this to me? I think he was frustrated, for sure. And as time was going on, and none of the people that I was calling were saying she was there, he was getting more worried. That afternoon, Tracy called Katie's parents, Jayan and Dave Sepich, more than 200 miles away in Carlsbad, New Mexico. Katie's mom, Jayan, picked up the phone. Her roommate said, so I said, no, I haven't. What's going on? And she explained that she and Joe had had an argument and she had stormed out. And she said, we had no one seen her since. And I said, oh, she's probably hiding out at a friend's house, probably trying to scare Joe. And she said, no, we've called everyone. And I told her that I was very worried and that I wanted to report her missing. And Jayan said, absolutely. Tracy called Las Cruces PD and gave the cops that photo of Katie. She did that, not knowing a body had already been found earlier that day. It wasn't long before they were back. I would say, within an hour they were back, and I took that as a good sign. And the officer asked me if I could come to identify someone. And I said yes, enthusiastically, because I guess I'm thinking they've arrested some woman, intoxicated. And that's what I'm going to do, to say, yep, that's her. It was far from what Tracy imagined. The officer drove her to the local hospital, where she was escorted down to the basement. Is it like TV and movies? Yeah. Did they pull a sheet back? She was in a body bag, and they folded back the top to about chest area. And I screamed, because all I saw was the side of her head. And I saw a silver earring. Silver earring. Tomarás una nice, salefrobade. Silver earring. And it was her. Like I didn't even have to look at her face. And I knew it was her. And she looked like she was in pain. And it was awful. Coming up, literally, I fell to my knees. Because no one close to her would hurt her like that. Being a parent involves a lot of things, but close to the top of the list is commitment. The minute Tracy Waters called the Sepiches to let them know his dad, Dave, I don't know where she's at or what she's doing, but I'm going to go give her my peace of mind if I find her. If he went prepared to give his daughter a lecture, everything changed once he arrived. When I walked in the door, there was a police captain and a victim's advocate and a minister, and I knew immediately when I saw him that it couldn't be good and warning. But they didn't know who she was because she didn't have any ID on her. I mean, it really hit me like a ton of bricks. Any father would have to see for himself. I'll never forget going down the hallway in the basement of that hospital to the morgue and going in there. And when they pulled that sheet back, I fell to my knees. And then I can remember walking out of there. And it was the feeling that you're leaving your child for the last time. It was horrible. Dave Sepades steadied himself and called his wife, Jan, and he said, she's gone. And I said, for sure? And he said, yeah. He said, I just saw her. she's dead. I just had a feeling. Call it mother's intuition. I had a very anxious feeling from the time I woke up that morning. It was Jan who told Katie's brother, AJ. It was such a blow into your soul that you really just don't know how to keep moving forward. And there's no sight from anything beyond the next. AJ immediately left Albuquerque, where he just started college, to be with his family. Caroline, the youngest of the Sepage kids, watched through her 9-year-old eyes. My visual memories of my life, right after my sister died, are really crisp and really clear, but they're not vibrant. It's as if this very bright light of was just gone, because it was my sister was gone. It was a seismic shift in the Sepage clan, because Katie was full of life from the moment she was born. It's okay. It's okay. Call a fire from day one. Katie was just the most rambunctious little kid you've ever met. And she grew up that way. She was just going 90 miles an hour her whole life. She was some. She was always the front runner, the one with the ideas, and I was kind of. In this own video, he literally tried to be. But Katie made sure she was front and center. Nevertheless, growing up, Katie protected him, always. If I was having trouble in school with a classmate, she would step in. Katie, not your mom. Oh, no, Katie would. They were always kind of together, us against the world kind of thing. There's A, J, Katie, and... Before long, Katie was off to college in Las Cruces and looking to the future. I said, "What do you think you're going to do with this MBA, Katie? What do you think you're going to do?" And she said, "Oh, Mom, I don't know yet. I really don't know." And you thought that's the way young, idealistic kids talk? Or you're right, Katie. She probably will. You know, she'll probably find something that she thinks is important and make it happen and maybe change the world. Now, the Sipage has wondered how or if their world could go on without her. In my mind, I was thinking, I don't know if we can do this. I've never been here before, and it just looked like a long, dark hallway that it can figure out how to get to the other end. And at this point, they would fight to save their family and for a special treat, but they also needed to know who took Katie away from them. Jan told me, she said, "I can't figure out who would do this to Katie, be a stranger. I had to be a random act, because no one close to her would hurt her like that." We didn't think so. Well, Katie had a way about her that she could tell someone something and get away with it that nobody else could tell them, and people didn't get angry with her. So, if it wasn't anyone she knew, then who? A big mystery to solve for the city of Las Cruces. A story for the local media, like NBC, Affiliate K, O, B, his family, friends, anybody that may have seen her that night at the bars here in town. This was a holiday weekend. Much of law enforcement was off the clock. A lot of work that should have been done wasn't done. A couple of days passed before Robert Jones was assigned as lead investigator for the sheriff's department. So it took a few days to sort of get up to speed. Yeah, we were way behind Abel. Way behind him. Mark Myers, who was there from Cruces PD and worked the case with Jones. By now, officers had returned to Tracy and Katie's house, where a roommate had made a discovery near Katie's bedroom window. A sign, Katie had made it home. We find her shoes. We find that the screen's been missing from the window, and you can actually see in the gravel where her body was, where she had struggled there. There was a difference of opinion. Than actually bodying. Some people believe that all that was the abduction of the fight and getting her away from there, meaning Katie could have been killed right there outside her home, or abducted there, killed somewhere else, and later dumped near the old landfill. Investigators did agree on one thing: Katie fought. But thanks to science, the evil that mattered them. In this case, Robert Jones was certain Katie had her attacker's DNA under her fingernails and elsewhere on her body. She obviously took some skin off of the person who did this. Forensic evidence was collected from Katie's remains. Investigators hoped that DNA profile would provide all the answers, because then all they would need was the suspect profile that matched it. Coming up, you know it's not good. Police have some questions for Katie's boyfriend, Joe. Not only took Katie Kepik was strong and unafraid. She just had this fearless attitude that, you know, I can handle it. You know, I've got it under control. That summer night in 2003, Katie was overpowered. She was tough. I think she did everything she could, you know. Tonight's investigators have made the case a top priority. Sepik was supposed to come home late Saturday night, but she never did. Despite all the look for it about this case, you have a murder case like this. You have people calling and saying, hey, this guy's saying, he did this or I saw this. Normally, people drop a dime on somebody they know. Yes, you get some tips, but we just want to get in on this one. Investigators started canvassing the neighborhood. Someone must have seen, or at least heard something. Parents shared an unusual fact about their daughter. Katie Sepik could not scream. She had a very husky voice, and she couldn't scream. I mean, when she would try, she could not scream. Ever since she was a little girl, meaning it was suddenly unlikely any neighbor, any witness, had heard a cry for help. You thought about that because her roommate's mother was asleep in the house. Tracy's mom was visiting. Her room was just a few feet away from where investigators believed Katie was attacked, but she never heard anything. And I'm sure that Katie at least tried, but her voice just wouldn't let her do it. No witnesses, just Katie and her attacker, someone law enforcement was certain would have some visible scratches. So, at least in those first 2 days, you're looking at somebody with some scrapes on them. We didn't. And there was also Katie's jewelry missing from her body. We hid every pawn shop in the state, in western Texas, and eastern Arizona and southern Colorado. They were looking for a watch and 2 rings, including the birthstone ring Katie's boyfriend Joe had bought for her, and that was one of the things that we never disclosed to anybody, because we knew that if we could ever find that ring, or if we ever found someone, they couldn't say, well, we knew about it because we didn't return up anymore. It doesn't. We looked at everything that we could that surrounded her there. Nothing. An impossible scenario anyway, thought Jayan, because Katie shared everything with her mom. Katie was very open and honest with me, and I know that if she had been being stalked, or if she felt about it, she would have told me. A security camera video from the bar they went to that night showed Joe and Katie together and holding hands as they left. However, at the house party that followed, things went south in a hurry. And when you start interviewing people at the party, you learn about the argument with the boyfriend. That comes up pretty quickly. Oh yeah, right away. It was extremely upset because she walked in on him kissing some other girl. That was a detail Joe omitted from his story to Katie's roommate Tracy. And from his initial statement to police, investigators wanted more from Joe. So 9 hours after Katie's body was found, they escorted him to the station and started pressing Joe hard. You know you're here, okay? Your girlfriend Katie is passed away, okay? Okay, just hurry. It's a clean habit. Joe was emotional but seemed to pull it together, and this time he offered more details. Sutandes tu pleni, konasi. Just hurries too. I was hoping you could tell me a little bit more about what happened. I was kind of pointed out by her mid-sister. She walked in and then she left. He said and a friend went to look for Katie in Katie's car. I drove by her house. Her life wasn't on, so I didn't stop. Joe said he then went back to the house party and fell asleep on the couch with the woman he had kissed. I was really drunk. I really didn't care. You don't care about her relationship very much. But I'm really faithful, as I should be. Joe said he did try to phone Katie. It's not hard to imagine a scenario in which a boyfriend and girlfriend have a fight over his involvement with some other woman. She storms off. They continue the fight someplace else. He loses his temper. It turns more violent than anybody in her body somewhere. It's a likely scenario. It's something that could have happened. I mean, just like that. I mean, it absolutely looked like he had some involvement in this. So, the investigator asked flat out, "Did you kill him?" "No, sir." "How did it happen?" "What, sir? Her death?" "I don't know, sir. I know nothing about you, sir. I know nothing about it." Why are we just going around? They needed to rule Joe in or out, along with everyone else who'd been at that house party. One by one, you're asking everyone who you know to be in attendance at the party to give you a DNA sample. Yes. How many people say yes? Everybody. So, 300, 40 people. Joe Bischoff. Coming up. They told us the reasons they thought it was Joe, and it broke my heart. Perfect boyfriend, now prime suspect. Could a hidden camera capture a confession? Sometimes people have to relieve their mind, and if it was Joe, that was the perfect place. When Dateline continues, when investigators spoke with Katie Sepik's boyfriend, Joe Bischoff, there were things that didn't sit well with them. For example, after Katie stormed off on the night she disappeared, Joe said he and a friend went looking for her. Lo and behold, that would have been the time that she would have been abducted. What's more, Joe's story was that he went to care and got out of the car. So, if you're really going to check on her, right? Big red flag. And then there were the phone calls. When we got all the phone records and got her phone, he was actually calling the phone, her purse, her phone and her keys. It sounds like he's calling her phone, trying to do a cover story, saying he's trying to get a hold of her. This is a guy trying to build a hell of a. Within days of Katie's murder, Joe left Las Cruces for his hometown 300 miles away. He told investigators he'd be coming back if they needed anything else from him. And of course, they did. Investigators asked Joe to return for another interview. And when I called him on the phone, he said that he wouldn't be back, that he had retained an attorney, wasn't going to be talking to us anymore. And then Joe Bischoff made it clear he was not going to provide his DNA. He's not helping us at all. Under what circumstances would someone not give their DNA to help solve the murder of somebody that they were involved with and loved and planned to marry if they don't have any involvement? We couldn't understand why he wouldn't give us the DNA if Joe wasn't saying. But his attorney explained the change of heart to the press by saying it had to do with the way the investigation was being handled. So now investigators had to try to get Joe's DNA without his cooperation. You follow Joe Bischoff around, hoping he was going to discard something, some soda can or something that you could get DNA off of. Anything, yeah. Didn't work. Didn't work. And because you don't have his DNA, he won't do an interview. You can't ask him to take his shirt off. We can't. He's basically untouchable. There's nothing we can do to him. Not yet, anyway. But the evidence seemed to be stacking up. And it broke my heart. I remember thinking, this just can't be. I used to tell him, make a list. Make a list of things that you think are important in someone that you would want to end up with. And make a list of deal breakers, you know. And when Katie called me about Joe, she said, Mom, no deal breakers, all the important things on the list. As a dad, you know, you kind of make sure it's going to treat your daughter right. And he did. I mean, he was a very nice, very polite gentleman. You know, he really, I think, thought the world of Katie. And it just boggled our mind when all this happened. I couldn't believe it. Could they have been that wrong about Joe? I knew Katie loved him. And it just broke my heart to think this man she loved killed her, and that her last being killed by someone she loved. Another huge blow to the Sepich family. because they couldn't believe anyone who knew and loved their daughter would be capable of taking her life. Up to that point, Joe was planning on coming for the funeral, and several of our friends found out about it, and they told some other people that he was a suspect. Some of our friends, Katie's friends, said he better not come. And so Joe Bischoff, who dated Katie for 8 months, did not attend her funeral services in Carlsbad. He might have been the only person ever to cross paths with Katie Sepik, who was not in attendance. There were well over 1,000 people there. They had to set up loudspeakers outside because Katie's brother AJ could barely speak. And from the only things that I can even remember were the feeling of the tears, kind of just streaming like a river down my face, and reminding everybody, in the crowd, just if you have a sibling, like, call them now, tell them you love them. While family and friends mourned and celebrated Katie Sepic's life, investigators were trying to solve her death, and that quest took them to the church. Per Joe wasn't at the funeral, but they wanted to be thorough. We photographed and videotaped all of the vehicles over there, all their tire tracks. Some shoe leather police work told them the tire likely belonged to a small pickup truck. Now they were hoping to find that vehicle parked at Katie's funeral. Nothing. Then another idea, camera at Katie's gravesite, hoping Joe Bischoff would visit and see if he confesses to Katie's grave. Sometimes people have to relieve their mind and apologize, and if, as Joe, that was the perfect place, he wouldn't allow him to attend the funeral. Maybe he'd be able to do it. Coming up, new evidence from the lab. She scratched her attacker. She did. There was plenty of DNA. There was DNA under every fingernail. I really don't think so. A hidden camera at a gravesite sounds like something from a movie. To investigators trying to solve a murder, it sounded promising. A chance to record Joe Bischoff maybe bearing his soul, confessing. It was a great idea, but it didn't work. A sprinkler knocked over the camera, and so there was no evidence Joe ever visited Katie's gravesite in Carlsbad. Cops remained focused on Joe, even though investigators frankly admitted they didn't have enough for an arrest. 22-year-old graduates sit from a late Saturday night party. Anything to keep the investigation from stalling. The one thing we are pretty well sure of is that it was someone she knew, and I feel confident that they will find the right person or persons. Publicly, they seem to hold it together. Their youngest daughter, Caroline, saw a different side. The look of sadness in my parents' eyes and my brother's eyes, and the fact that it was there day after day, that it never went away. Forensic evidence collected from Katie's body had been sent to a lab, and the results were back. She scratched her attacker. She did. There was plenty of DNA. There was DNA under every fingernail on both hands. The same DNA was also found in other areas of her body. That profile belonged to one man. I'm thinking one of the first things you do is run that DNA against the national database. We did. And that person was not in the database. And this is not a stranger. Everything led us. But from the beginning, Tracy Waters, Katie's roommate, disagreed. I said, I don't think so. I really don't think so. Actually, I said impossible. Tracy knew Joe initially did not tell her or police that Katie had caught him kissing another woman that night, an explanation for how Joe behaved after that. I think he knew what he had done to cause their argument, and he didn't want me to know. He was embarrassed. I think he was very embarrassed. As for his refusal to cooperate with investigators, Tracy said Joe was following his parents' advice. They were the ones who'd hired the attorney, said Tracy. And I think that that's what any parent, if they truly believe that their son was innocent, or if they believe their son was guilty. True. I think it's what a parent does to protect their kid, and I think that that's what the Bischoffs did to protect Joe. Jones and Myers tried to get a warrant for Joe's DNA. Susana Martinez, who was district attorney in Dona Ana County when Katie was killed, would not approve it. We didn't have the probable cause. You have to have probable cause to be able to present to a judge to say, this is why. Everybody else gave a DNA sample. He's her boyfriend. He's the only one who won't. That's not enough for a court order. It is not sufficient. Detective Myers disagreed. I, to this day, believe we have plenty of probable cause. He puts himself at the scene of the crime. He's creating an alibi, and he's not truthful about it in the beginning. That normally gets you over the probable cause. Absolutely, absolutely. But, you know, it was a high-profile case. We don't get a lot of those kinds. We are overly cautious. Then another idea, this time from Robert Jones. Joe had told investigators he and Katie had sex the day before she went missing. Jones wondered if Joe's DNA might still be on the bedding they'd collected from Katie's room. We sent it in. The DNA sample of Katie's bed. Let's clear this up right now. The results are in, and a whole new puzzle is about to begin. I jolted out of bed, and I just ran down the hallway. I just was like, I am not a victim. He picked the wrong girl. When Dateline continues. In 1950, a small town in New Mexico renamed itself Truth or Consequences after a popular radio show. Now, just down the road, people who loved Katie Sepich were struggling to deal with both the truth and the consequences of her murder. I had a lot of dreams that she wasn't dead, and that it was all just something that had to be staged. Called me and told me that. Except every time Tracy opened her eyes, reality set in. Katie was not coming back. I spent a lot of time concerned that someone had been watching our house, would know all of our moves at our schedules. That's if it's somebody random. If it's not somebody random, is that someone that you've interacted with, that you've shared a drink with, that you've posed in a picture with, could hurt someone like they hurt her? Yeah. Tracy had staked out the lonely ground of believing Joe Bischoff was not capable of hurting Katie. But as the days went by, there were times where I wanted it to just be him, because then it would be over, it'd be done. And I was willing to accept being wrong about someone if it meant there was an answer. Finally, a few months after the murder came an answer of sorts. Male DNA had been found on Katie's bed sheets. We don't know for sure that it's Joe, but we know that Katie wasn't seeing anybody else. Presumably that's Joe. Presumably that's Joe. Their prime suspect. So, investigators eagerly conclude with the DNA found on Katie's body, and it doesn't match the DNA under her fingernails. It does not match the DNA on her body at all, which could only mean one thing. Joe didn't do this. Joe Bischoff, who had changed his story, who had stopped cooperating, who had lawyered up, who was the only person at that party not to give a DNA sample, was also not the killer. Well, shit, because now I'm like, now is the worst case scenario, right? Then you're back to square one, square zero. And now we're 3 months behind. And we don't have a clue. In hindsight, Myers admits they've developed a case of tunnel vision. That didn't change his conviction that Joe Bischoff's refusal to cooperate was inexcusable. I'd be hard-pressed to not want to punch him in the throat. To me, we made your job harder and put Katie's family through hell for no reason. Give up your DNA and be there for the family. That's all we had to do. After the results of the bedding came back, Joe Bischoff did eventually give a sample of his DNA. The district attorney contacted Joe Bischoff's attorney and said, "Look, we got a DNA sample of Katie's bed. It's a male, but it's not the one that we found on our body. So, if that's you, so if it's Joe, let's clear this up right now and get everybody off the bed. And that you didn't turn on him, and that I stood by my vision of him the entire time. I just felt so bad for him because he had been villainized wrong. The sympathies did not share that sympathy. Yeah, definitely. We were very upset that this could have been resolved way earlier, and they could have been on the road looking somewhere else. And so, if it wasn't Joe Bischoff, then who? Katie's killer was still on the loose. And now, all of Las Cruces seem to be on edge. You feel it in the community. You go get a cup of coffee, and people ask you about it. You know they expect you're just like, hey, we're safe, right? And you can't really tell them that. Yeah. It was stressful. Then a new lead, another woman, another attack, and a new mystery. One that would take investigators on a manhunt halfway across the country. A crime hauntingly like Katie's. Would there be a link? Now, her family wondered if her killer would ever be found. I was when that DNA didn't match. The bedding didn't match because I didn't want it to be him. On the other hand, I was like, Dave, I thought, well, if it's not him, who is it? And then investigators discovered a disturbing new lead. It had happened elegant days before Katie's murder, about 100 miles away in Green Bay, Wisconsin. There was a female at the bar and walked outside and was going to her vehicle. It sounded a lot like what had happened to Katie Sepik. The 25-year-old woman had gotten upset with her boyfriend and walked out on him, and she was picked up by two individuals. They grabbed her, threw her in the vehicle. They drove her out into a secluded farm area, where they raped her, they strangled her, and then they poured a liquid on her body and lit her up by hair. Certainly sounds familiar. Sounds real familiar. Miraculously, the woman survived. She crawled to a nearby home, rang the doorbell, and the owners called 911, and as they tried to help the injured woman, the dispatcher encouraged them. They asked her questions. What did they look like? Were they tall? The young woman couldn't offer much more. Not at that point. She was eventually able to provide drugs, which led to these sketches. Two men who drove a truck, just as investigators believed Katie's killer did. Then came a call from the manager of a nearby dairy farm, and one of the farmers there recognized both of the individuals as employees. Their names were Gregorio Morales and Juan Nieto. He bought soda for Morales, and once Morales drank from the bottles, the dairy farmer secured them in a plastic bag and turned them over to investigators, who sent them out for DNA testing. The investigators also looked into the suspects' backgrounds and discovered this. One of the suspects who lived in New Mexico, who had Yacosa miles on us. Our hope is real high. But you've been confident about jobs, huh? Yeah, I think you just look for any more selective that you can find to hang on to. Jay, I realized I've since decided, don't use the word if. I never use the word if. You'd rather think about what is. Face what is. Try to change the future if you can. But don't look back and say, what if? A few months later, investigators made testing and they learned Gregorio Morales was a match. Just not the match Robert Jones was hoping for. And his DNA is a match for the Green Bay case. But not for Katie's. But there's still one more suspect in that. Yes. Juan Nieto is still outstanding. Juan Nieto was the second suspect in the Green Bay case. He remained a suspect in Katie's murder. Right now, investigators in the septic. Only one problem. Mr. Nieto was nowhere to be found. Coming up, I just felt like I'd be kicked in the stomach. We need to bring families justice. It sort of transformed Katie's family, didn't it? It did. When Dateline continues. In the summer of the 1000 Tessera, the Septic family held out hope that cops were closer to catching Katie's killer. One of the suspects, Gregorio Morales, turned out to be a match for the rape case in Wisconsin, but not to Katie's murder. He's still on the run. More than a year after Katie's murder, Nieto and Georgia had arrested him. They obtained a DNA sample, sent it out to the lab, and it's not a match. It's not a match. Not a match. Not a match to Katie's case. Not a match to Katie's case, but plenty of evidence to tie him to the Wisconsin case. So, that one was solved. Katie's murder was not. That was definitely a really strong and unbelievably harsh letter. Robert Jones was calling it quits after it was 3 years with a badge. Tough to live with it unsolved. Very tough. He didn't want to stop. No, he didn't want to stop. It's hard to put down, right? I mean, here you have her whole life ahead of her, and that was stolen from her. That's hard to walk away from. So, Myers was determined to give it all he had. The Sepages weren't giving up either. Jayan recalled Jones once telling her how his team regularly searched the national DNA database to see if it matched Katie's killer. And I made the comment that this man was such a monster that he would be arrested for something. And when he was arrested, when they took his fingerprints, and when they took his mugshot, that they would swab his cheek, and we'd be able to identify him. And that's when Robert Jones said, "Oh, no, Jayan, it's illegal to do that. It's illegal in New Mexico and almost every state, because in nearly every state, DNA was taken from people who were convicted, not people who were arrested." And I thought, what do you mean they don't do this? That realization stirred something in Jayan, and that was when I started thinking, well, this is just wrong. We need to shorten that time frame. We need to bring families justice. She got to work educating herself about DNA and the justice system. Caroline, at 10 years old, got involved. I even saw DNA and about DNA and criminal justice, and I was just a little kid, but I was a big nerd. So we just had a lot of family discussions about what was required to get a match and how that would work. And that's when we came up with the idea of, in New Mexico, expanding, taking DNA to all felony arrests. It sort of transformed Katie's family, didn't it? Miss Ana Martinez, she was district attorney when Katie was killed in Vigilantria. She also helped the Sepages in their efforts to change the state's DNA laws. As part of the District Attorney Association, I then started to help out by making sure he was trying to push the law forward with the state legislature. In the 2000 almost 2.5 years after Katie's murder, the Sepages state representative submitted their proposed bill to the legislature for review. He told Zayan they were in a race against time. New Mexico, in the 2000 only had a 300-day session, and we were told, there's no way you can get this law passed in 300 days. It's going to be impossible. Impossible was not a word Zayan liked to hear. She moved 300 miles north to the state capital in Santa Fe for a month. My mother and Nancy, she just decided this was too important. Once Zayan got there, she discovered most of the legislators, while sympathetic, did not want to change existing law. They were concerned that it would be unconstitutional. You have to put a Q-tip inside your mouth, that it's a search fingerprint, that because DNA contains the blueprint of who you are, that it's more of an invasion of privacy than a fingerprint. Nonsense, Jayan thought. We take fingerprints of arrestees all the time, and DNA is the modern fingerprint. I got to the legislature every morning at about 7, and I stayed till every night at about 8, legislators in New Mexico, and I talked to Katanokto of them face to face to sit down and explain things to them. Katie's family hoped her murder would help bring real change and maybe prevent other families from suffering a similar fate. And, they prayed, a new law might just help catch Katie's killer as well. We just felt like, eventually, somebody's going to get caught. And if the right person was arrested, it would be the person. It was a family effort. It was difficult for me to see, you know. My sister's face kind of being used as the poster child for legal action, you know. It was just at that time, seeing her in the news, and seeing that her face and her likeness, just everywhere, it hurt, you know. Exactly. You know, into something extremely public. As the brief legislative session drew to a close, The Seepage family held their collective breath as they'd done so many times before. No telling what was about to happen, but at the end of the session, there was finally a vote. A crime unsolved. A family on the brink. I wanted answers. I wanted answers. I really wanted answers. Was a breakthrough near? Now we couldn't give up. Katie Seepage had fought hard for her life. Katie's mother, Jan, fought hard too for a new law that might help catch her daughter's killer and maybe save other lives as well. I just believe that had this been on the books, this law been on the books 10 years ago, Katie's killer might have already been convicted and she would be alive today. In February 2006, the New Mexico state legislature voted on the Seepage's proposed bill. It didn't provide no votes. So you must have done something right? Well, I believe in it. I know that it's right, and I did a lot of research, and one by one changed some minds and hearts. It became known as Katie's Law, mandating that law enforcement collect DNA right at the time of arrest for a violent crime, instead of waiting the years it might take to secure a conviction. It was really inspiring to make a difference, and we were just really grateful that it happened because we had so much hope that it would lead to a match for Katie's case and that it would help countless other families. How was the fight to change the law change your mom? It's made her into a warrior, that's for damn sure. And so that changed kind of not only how I view my mother, but also in a big way how I. And perhaps this newfound mission was also helping Jay, N, and Dave deliver on a promise they'd made to each other early on to keep their family together. They were keeping up a lot of their strength through fighting and through the case. And that was something that I think was probably the only thing at that point in time that was really breathing life into them. They made up their minds that they were going to do whatever they could to make sure that if they could take that tragedy and turn it into so much good that we couldn't give up. While JN found a purpose in pushing for Katie's Law, Dave remained consumed by something else, finding out who killed his daughter. I can't work. I find myself on the computer, looking at things, looking at maps, and trying to figure out where Katie walked. He wanted justice. He wanted vengeance. He basically wanted to know that whoever did this to Katie was going to receive what was coming to them. I get the feeling he was working at least as hard as the police. Oh, if not harder. You know, he was living and breathing every single moment of every single day. Over the years, they've tried everything, doubled the rewards. They even hired a famous psychic. She told us that he would be caught. Doubled the rewards, and hired, if you are, double the rewards, psychic. It would be through DNA, and it would be shortly before Christmas. So many paths had led nowhere. I had made the decision that it was very possible we would never know, and that I had to accept that and move on. And that took a lot of work to come to that because I wanted answers. Tracy Waters felt the same way. I really started to believe we would never know, that this person would have gotten away with this and is potentially hurting so many more people because someone that could do what I saw done to her could hurt other people. He believed in his heart that one day he'd be able to deliver the news that Katie's family and friends craved. I never gave up hope because we had such good evidence. Eventually, this guy is going to reoffend, and then he's going to get swabbed, and then he's going to get caught. Exactly. That's what the hope was. Didn't make it any less frustrating, but it was. That's what she held on to. Myers believed he would strike again. Little did investigators know he already had. Coming up, 2 young women in a frantic, frightening ordeal. Somehow, I just knew he was in the house. In the years following Katie Seepage's murder, investigators chased one dead-end lead after another, never knowing the killer had already revealed himself. Remember that frantic and I-911 call you heard at the beginning of our story? The 2 women had locked themselves in the bathroom after an intruder broke into their Las Cruces apartment in November 2003. They survived. Nella and Leslie, the college roommates, on that 911 call, Tell me about the place you guys decided to live in. Cute little apartment, same little story, 2-bedroom, 2-bath. Yeah, it was really close to campus, so you felt safe there? Yeah, that was until they saw someone watching. We saw him in front of what was my window, and he quickly kind of took off. And you saw him looking into your window. Scary. Very scary. A couple of weeks later, Leslie saw the man again, crouching below their window, peeking inside. And it continued that way for a while. Even when they couldn't see him, they knew he was there. We often heard him, like bumping into the walls, rubbing up against the bushes, going over the rocks. So we heard him almost more than we saw him. No question it was the same, yeah. He's what? Circling your apartment? Yeah, like we couldn't really tell what he was doing. No. We weren't going to go out and check. We had like a little backyard that was gated, and we would find our gate to be open. And most of the times, the gate was open or the rock was moved. So, they changed their routines. Anela even took a self-defense class. They notified the complex's security team and told their neighbors, but nothing ever came of it. I think there was an aspect that, because he never talked to us, he never approached us, that, yes, we were frightened, but I think we also came to feel that he was just never going to do anything. Like, he was just weird and creepy, but that was the extent of it, yes. And maybe fixated on the two of you, but from a distance. Yeah. Very wrong. It happened on a rainy night just 2.5 months after Katie Sepik was murdered. Leslie did not know what was coming, but she had an uneasy feeling. I was actually talking to my boyfriend, who's now my husband, and I just told him I'm frightened, I'm scared, and I asked him if he could just stay on the line with me until I fell asleep, and so he did. I don't know if it was a loud noise, or I really do feel like somebody was there telling me, like, get up and go, because I jolted out of bed and I just ran down the hallway to Anela's bedroom. Somehow, I just knew he was in the house. Anela was in her bedroom. I see Ben's. I can see, like, a silhouette there in the corner, and she comes in. I close the door. I lock it, and moments later, he's rattling the door. Then he left, or he seemed to, but it wasn't over. We hear him go around the house and start doing something at our window. And so, to us, we feel like he's trying to get into the window. So then we go. I call Enayandenden. I was like, he picked the wrong girl. Like, he's going to die tonight. I just was like, I am not a victim. And after 3 terrifying minutes, Las Cruces police showed up and arrested the suspect. He had a knife on him. Knife on him. He had a knife on him. There's no telling what would have happened that night. But the idea that the two of you could have ended up raped and murdered is clearly not outside the realm of possibility here. Everything was so vapor. Yeah, very lucky. And to think that, some victims, it's just a whole different story. Some people are on the losing side of those same odds. Yeah. 23-year-old Gabriel Avila was convicted several months later of aggravated burglary and resisting arrest. He faced a 9-year sentence. But for some unknown reason that baffles me to this day, the judge let him bond on bond to get his affairs in order, and he absconded. Of course, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, he was convicted of some pretty heinous crimes. No one knew it then. But Gabriel Avila's burglary conviction held the key to solving Katie Sepich's murder. First, though, investigators needed to find him because Avila was somewhere in the wind. Looks like we have the person who killed our daughter. The revelation that stunned everyone. Katie's killer captured at last. To really stare evil in the face like that and confront it one-on-one. You had it. Yeah. Gabriel Avila was on the run until suddenly he wasn't. After more than a year as a fugitive, thanks to a tip. Still, processing DNA is far more cumbersome than TV dramas would lead you to believe. Myers, to receive the news, he'd been waiting a long time to hear. It was a friend of the sheriff's department who called him. It's like, hey, we got a hit, and how soon can you come over to the office? I'll be right there. Dera Osi, Wanarara Osi, the Sepikis got the call, too. And I was. 3 years of bad hunches and blind alleys. DNA had identified Katie Sepich's killer. You ever hear the name Gabriel Avila before that? We'd never heard it before. He wasn't at any of your files. None of our files. The name never came up, never ran across him at all. It was amazing. It never came up, it was amazing. I mean, when they told us, we thought for sure that if we ever found out, that it would be somebody connected somehow. And this was crazy. And it wasn't. A sense of relief for training the next two at a bar or in a photograph. No, I was so happy for her in that, because for someone that you know to hurt you has to be infinitely painful. So her last thoughts were not ones of betrayal, not a feeling of betrayal. Myers went to interview Avila's ex-wife, who had divorced him after his conviction. Remember those tire trucks investigators had sold, the ones they thought came from a pickup truck? We asked her about the truck. She told us that it was sold. The tires had been swapped. Eventually, investigators located the originals and matched them to the trucks found at the landfill. Avila's ex also told Detective Myers something else. She said that when she was cleaning out the truck to make it presentable on Bull, she found a ring. It was not the ring Katie's boyfriend Joe had given her. However, it was another ring Katie had been wearing that same night. Now Myers had more than he needed. He went to speak with Avila in prison. Specifically, what we're looking into is a homicide that occurred in 2003. The name didn't do it. Then Myers revealed he had DNA evidence linking Avila to Katie's murder, and he had Katie's ring. He slumped down in his chair. He just gave up at that point and told us what happened. It was, in the end, the most random of encounters. 2 lives colliding in the middle of the night. He saw Katie walking across the street. No, I'm not sure I did. A couple of us down here. I told him, I can be alive. I can be alive. He yelled at us all night. Avila said he planned to head home, but then saw Katie again in front of her house and observed her without her opening a window and get inside. That's when Avila said he struck and raped and strangled Katie. It's just a monster in the right place, crossing paths with the victim. Literally, just a motivated offender crossing paths with a suitable victim that thought the right opportunity. She leaves the party 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later. Maybe they never meet. 5 minutes to a minute later, earlier, and they've never seen her. More than 3 years after Katie's murder, the Sepages finally had that elusive answer. Today, we are rejoicing that it looks like we have the person who killed our daughter. We're so incredibly grateful for all of the hard work. Grateful, yes, but still faced with this harsh reality. Avila's arrest for break until after Katie's murder. So Katie's law wouldn't have saved Katie. Even so, it could have provided answers a lot faster. It would have identified her killer sooner, but it wouldn't have saved her. During the investigation, a psychic had told Jayan and Dave Katie's killer would be caught right before Christmas. So Christmas came and went, and we thought, well, that. The day after Christmas, on what would have been Katie's 6th birthday, Gabriel Avila was charged with murder and kidnapping. Dia Susana Martinez prosecuted the case. She was later elected governor of New Mexico. We didn't drop a single charge. There was no pre-bargaining in this case. Before, you had it. Yeah, and there was no way. And so he pled straight up, a life sentence, and he will die in prison where he should. The Sepages were at the sentencing, of course. A. J. had waited for this moment to look his sister's killer in the eye and tell Avila how he'd stolen. A. J's best friend, his protector, being able to really stare evil in the face like that and front it one-on-one, it was cathartic. After the year it was over, something surprising happened. Avila requested to speak with the Sepages to apologize. It was relieving to me when he apologized, and he said, "I don't know why." He said, "It was just something I did," and he said, "If I ever had the chance to undo it, I would." And we saw remorse, which kind of helped make it easier. I don't want him out of prison. I don't want him to ever be able to hurt anyone else, but I do believe that I'm supposed to forgive, and I want him to have salvation, because then God wins. The Sepages have spent more than a decade championing Katie's. How many states now have something like Katie's law? 301 states. So, you're satisfied? Or you got Tequinia states to go? We've got Tequinia states to go? What initially began as a vehicle to help catch Katie's killer turned out to be much more than that. It became bigger. It became, all the other lives that could be saved, all the other rapes that wouldn't be, No. But we know they're there. We know that for certain. It's hard to not know who they are. And I always tell Zan, it's like, in a lot of ways, I can't wait to get to heaven so I can find out, who they were and what the circumstances was. And, find out what we actually accomplished, But, we're just going to keep after her. But she told her parents she wanted to change the world. In the end, her whole family did. That's all for this edition of Dateline. We'll see you again next Friday at 9 Octo Central. And of course, I'll see you each weeknight for NBC Nightly News. I'm Lester Holt,